as themselves Christian, you were probably raised to believe that the Bible was written in some sort of historical vacuum. The various authors being inspired by God alone and having no outside influences whatsoever. However, the many books that make up the Bible were, in fact, written by several different authors, some of whom are unknown. And these men were influenced in a variety of ways. This is in accordance with historical patterns and connections to older references that can be found in other religious or historical texts. Although this topic has been much debated, it's commonly accepted by scholars today that parts of the Bible may have been influenced by other cultures. In the Persian scriptures of the Zoroastrians, the Avesta tells the story of how Ormuzd created the world and the first two humans in 6 days and then rested on the seventh. The names of these two human beings were Adama and Eva. These texts date back as far as the 10th century before Common Era. A man is warned of an imminent flood by a god and is instructed to build a large boat in order to survive. The dimensions of the boat are 120 cubits. The building materials are wood, pitch, and reeds, and there are 6 decks. After the flood, the boat lands on a mountaintop where the man sends out a series of birds to find dry land. He eventually lets all the people and animals free and sacrifices to the god that saved him. Now, although these details sound like they were taken directly from the book of Genesis, you'd find the same information in the story of Utnapishtim, found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was written circa 2150 to 1400 BCE. The epic was written down at least 1,000 years before Genesis was written down, and redacted and finished after the Babylonian captivity. In the Bible, the 10 Commandments were given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and were written on stone tablets, allegedly by the hand of God himself. This was thought to have taken place around 1490 BCE. However, if you look at chapter 125 of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, from around 2600 BC, it seems that Moses may have had a little help. The Egyptian Book of the Dead reads like the 10 Commandments written in the negative confession. Some examples are, Book of the Dead, I have not blasphemed. Exodus 27, Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that shall take the name of the Lord his God in vain. Book of the Dead, I have not committed adultery. Exodus 20:14, Thou shalt not commit adultery. Book of the Dead, I have not stolen. Exodus 20:15, Thou shalt not steal. There is also some similarity between the story of the 10 Commandments and the Code of Hammurabi, dated to around 1772 BCE. The origin of the Israelite nation is a little vague since the biblical accounts don't always agree with archaeological evidence. According to the Bible, the Canaanites were a tribe of people who descended from Ham, the son of Noah. They were thought to be a cursed nation that the Israelites destroyed. However, conquests are never that simple, and it is widely accepted that the Canaanite religion had numerous influences on Judaism. Psalms 29 is a hymn that bears so much similarity to Ugaritic, the language of the Canaanites, poetry that some believe that it was originally a hymn to Baal. Today scholars agree that the Israelites emerged from a Canaanite civilization in the early part of the 2nd millennium BC. There is an interesting correlation between the sacred texts of the Zoroastrians and the chapter of creation and book of Isaiah in the Old Testament. This can absolutely be attributed to the influence that the Mesopotamians held over the Israelites during the time the Israelites were living in Babylon. There are countless examples of influences from Zoroastrianism, but this one is very compelling. Yasna 44.3-4-5, who made the roots of the sun and stars, by whom the moon waxes and wanes. Isaiah 40:26, lift up your eyes on high and see who hath created these things, who bringeth out their host by number, and calleth them all by their names, by the greatness of his might, and strength, and power, not one of them was missing. Yasna 44.4 to 1 to 3, who fixed the earth below and kept the sky above from falling. Isaiah 40:12, who hath measured the waters in the hollow of his hand, and weighed the heavens with his palm. Who hath poised with 3 fingers the bulk of the earth, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in a balance. It should be clear by now that there were a number of ways that Judaism and Christianity were influenced by Zoroastrianism. One of the primary examples is the existence, structure, and hierarchy of the angels and demons. According to scholars, the Zoroastrians were the first to believe in angels, the idea of Satan, and the ongoing battle between the forces of good and evil. And, interestingly, Zoroastrian art portrays the prophet Zarathustra as being surrounded by the same halo of light in which Christian figures are often depicted. Along with the idea of good and evil, the concept of heaven and hell seem to predate Judaism as well. Once again, we go back to Zoroastrianism and Persian influence. The prophet Daniel was the first biblical figure to refer to ideas of resurrection and judgment, in Daniel 12:2, and this can be easily attributed to Babylonian influence. The word paradise comes directly from the Persian religion of Mithraism. The word hell seems to derive from the Norse word hell, most certainly a pre-Christian concept. There are countless examples of hell-like afterlives portrayed in pagan mythology. While the New Testament definitely mentions the concepts of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Matthew 28:19, it makes no actual mention of the word Trinity, and there is still plenty of contention as to whether the Trinity Godhead is a biblical theme. Judaism teaches pure monotheism, while Catholicism favors the Trinity concept. Yet it is clearly a concept that was influenced by pagan religions existing at the time that Christianity came about. Examples of pagan trinities are Amun, Ra, and Papa of Egyptian mythology, Anu, Enlil, and Enki of Sumerian mythology, and Ishtar, Baal, and Tammuz of Babylonian mythology. It is interesting to note the possible influence that other religions in existence at the time of Jesus had their own philosophies. While the pagan aspects of the rituals surrounding Christian celebrations can easily be explained by the fact that these rituals were intended to replace pagan practices, the similarities in philosophy can only be explained through external influence. Although the fundamental aspects of the two religions differ greatly, there are still some remarkable parallels between the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of Buddha, Mithras, and Zarathustra. Just more to consider. But as I've been saying a lot these days, don't throw out the spiritual baby with the biblical bathwater. Don't ever forget we are spiritual beings caged in a meat suit trap, trying to find our way back home. The Bible, although it's not a history book or even a book of mathematical knowledge, much less a book of science, it's still a book of ancient wisdom and spiritual teachings. I personally would suggest the first 5 books, the books of Moses, be read with the understanding that man is to blame for all the shitty stuff attributed to God. Moses, as far as I can tell, never even existed, and all this stuff was borrowed from earlier Babylonian information and rewritten with Yahweh at its core. It doesn't make it completely wrong, but it does make it a plagiarized work reissued to the early Jews, just to keep them in line, mostly by the use of fear. Fear the Lord. That part is BS. The rest was pretty good ancient storytelling. You may have to retranslate much of the information with the new light you are discovering. However, there's still some useful stuff in there. Your spiritual side is the one capable of going within and finding a path out of this mess. It's our only hope of ever being released from the powers that be, which is Yahweh and all his minions. That's where we are until we find the gnosis, knowledge, to keep from being reincarnated into new do-overs, again and again. Knock and keep knocking, seek and keep seeking. Let's finish with a couple of sayings from the Book of Thomas. 1. And he said, whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death. 2. Jesus said, let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all. It all makes sense, huh? Keep seeking. Let